Alzheimer's risk.
Yes. This is a really important piece of the puzzle. We really have to break the taboo and talk about this.
Gaining weight, joint pain, just feeling completely emotionally overwhelmed. They felt like they were going crazy. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep into a topic that really impacts so many lives, menopause. And specifically, we want to unpack its significant and sometimes pretty surprising impact on the brain. Yeah, for this deep dive, we've gathered quite a collection of sources. We've got research insights, articles, and some incredibly personal comments shared by listeners. People who are right in the middle of this transition or maybe supporting someone who is. Our mission, really, is straightforward. We want to pull out the most important knowledge from all this material to help you understand what's genuinely happening in the brain during this phase and, crucially, what can actually be done about it. This topic feels particularly relevant for me right now. I have someone very close who's just starting to go through it, and just seeing some of what she's experiencing, it's made me really curious. And it just highlights how vital it is that we actually talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. And it's a phase of life that, so many women will experience. There's such a crucial need to understand how it affects not just the body, but the brain, and overall health.
Okay, so let's dive in. Maybe we can start with what some of the listeners actually share. It's pretty powerful stuff. We had one comment from a 48-year-old woman. She said she felt like her body was, quote, waging war on itself. Gaining weight, joint pain, just feeling completely emotionally overwhelmed. She also mentioned she had her only child quite late, at 43. And she said she feels like she's only now starting to feel like a vibrant woman again, partly because these conversations are finally happening. It's hopeful in a way. Then there was another commenter, a wife, 45, and also a 55-year-old listener. They both used the exact same phrase. They felt like they were going crazy. Mm-hmm. And reading that, you just feel how isolating that must be and how much people are just craving some understanding.
Yeah. What those women describe is incredibly common. And let me just be really clear about this for anyone listening right now. What you might be feeling, it is real. It's not in your head. It is absolutely rooted in biology. And this is the key thing, I think. Menopause isn't just hot flashes or period stopping. It's a whole body experience. Yeah. And the brain plays this huge central role. So those symptoms, people often talk about the hot flashes, yes, but also the insomnia, the memory lapses, anxiety, depression, these are actually neurological symptoms. They originate in the brain.
Wait, really? Neurological? Even something like a hot flash? That feels so physical. How does that start in the brain?
That's a great question. Because it does feel physical, right? But think about it like this. The brain and the ovaries, they're in constant communication, always have been throughout a woman's life. It's part of what we call the neuroendocrine system, a constant dialogue. So when the ovaries naturally start to slow down their hormone production during menopause, the brain feels that change immediately. It notices. And estrogen specifically has this critical role in the brain that goes way beyond just reproduction. We now know it's essential for brain energy. Basically, estrogen helps your brain cells, your neurons, burn glucose efficiently. That's their fuel. So when estrogen levels drop, those neurons, they slow down. They can't produce energy as well. And they actually start aging faster because of it.
Wow. Okay. Faster aging.
Yeah.
So that idea of reduced brain energy, is that directly why listeners mention things like forgetfulness?
Yeah.
Or feeling more anxious? Is that the connection?
That's exactly the link, yes. And what's really fascinating is that certain brain regions are more sensitive to this estrogen decline than others, and when they get disrupted, it leads directly to the symptoms people experience. For instance, the hypothalamus, that's like the body's thermostat. When estrogen drops, it can go haywire. Result, hot flashes. The brainstem helps control sleep cycles. Estrogen changes there. Hello, insomnia. And then you have the amygdala, your emotional center, and the hippocampus, which is key for memory. Both are packed with estrogen receptors. So when estrogen drops, you see mood swings, anxiety, and those frustrating memory lapses. I mean, there's data on this. One study I saw tracked a woman from age 43 to 51, and they measured a startling 30% drop in her brain's energy and metabolism over those years.
30%. Wow. That's huge. Okay. I can totally see now how that would make someone feel like their mind is just, playing tricks on them. Or like that 55-year-old listener said, experiencing brain fog. She mentioned struggling to find words, mid-sentence and feeling really anxious about it, terrified she was going senile, was her phrase.
Yeah, brain fog. It was incredibly common. That difficulty finding the right word, forgetting names, or why you walked into a room, that feeling of mental sludge, it is directly tied to those drops in brain energy we were just talking about. And I really want to address that fear of going senile directly because it causes so much worry. The research actually shows something quite reassuring. When scientists compare cognitive performance, like memory tests and thinking skills, they don't find significant differences between men and women after menopause compared to before, or compared to men of the same age. So even if you feel foggy, the data suggests you are still sharp, you haven't lost your edge. But that feeling, the anxiety that comes with the fog, that is absolutely real and needs acknowledging.
Okay, that is incredibly reassuring. I hope people listening hear that loud and clear. But you mentioned something earlier, a connection that I think catches a lot of people off guard, the potential link between menopause and Alzheimer's risk.
Yes, this is a really important piece of the puzzle, looking at the bigger picture. So Alzheimer's disease affects around 6 million people in the U.S. currently, but here's the statistic from the sources that really stands out. Almost 2/3 of those affected are women. That's basically a 2-to-1 ratio, women to men. It's stark.
2-to-1.
And emerging research is strongly suggesting that menopause, and specifically the hormonal changes that come with it, might be a key factor driving this disparity. Remember how we talked about estrogen and brain energy? Well, the decline in estrogen can also, in some women, contribute to the formation of amyloid plaques in the brain. These plaques are one of the main physical hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. And studies using brain scans have actually shown an increase in these plaques in women during their middle-aged years, right around the menopausal transition, which is something they don't typically see to the same extent in men of the same age.
That's really sobering. The idea that menopause could potentially be sort of setting the stage for Alzheimer's risk decades later. I honestly never made that connection before digging into this.
Right. And it's crucial to frame this correctly. It's a risk factor, okay? Not a guarantee. Not every woman develops these plaques during menopause, and certainly not every woman who has some plaques will develop dementia. There are many factors involved. However, what this research highlights is that the processes underlying Alzheimer's can begin silently, years, even decades before memory problems become obvious. And it looks like midlife, especially the menopausal transition, might be a critical window when these changes can start, which actually frames menopause not just as an endpoint, but as a really important window for taking action to protect long-term brain health.
That shift in perspective, seeing midlife as this key window for brain health action, that's really powerful, actually. It reminds me of a comment we saw from a husband. He was urging other men to really support their wives, saying, it's just a really hard time. And I think a lot of partners want to be that supportive figure, but maybe don't know how. So what can people actually do, whether it's for themselves or for a loved one, to support brain health during this whole transition?
That husband's comment is spot on. Partner support, family support, it's truly invaluable. It can make such a difference. And the good news, highlighted in the sources we looked at, is that there are definitely lifestyle changes that can have a huge positive impact. And often these don't necessarily involve jumping straight to medication, though that's a conversation for a woman and her doctor, of course. Diet comes up again and again, specifically the Mediterranean style of eating. Research consistently links it to benefits like lowering the risk of cognitive decline, less depression, better heart health, and even reducing hot flashes. It's naturally rich in things called phytoestrogens, plant compounds that can have a mild estrogen-like effect. Foods like flax seeds, sesame seeds, lentils, beans. Oh, and yes, dark chocolate gets a mention too.
Dark chocolate. Okay, see, that's a lifestyle change I think most people can get behind.
Right. Always nice when something enjoyable is also good for you. Then there's stress management. This is huge. High chronic stress and the cortisol that comes with it, it can actually interfere with estrogen pathways, essentially stealing precursors the body could use for estrogen. So finding ways to actively reduce stress is key. Mindfulness, meditation, yoga, just going for relaxing walks together, whatever works for the individual.
I can see how stress could really exacerbate things. I know I certainly observe that in my own life and with my partner.
Absolutely. And then exercise is vital. It helps with hormone balance generally, boosts mood, supports brain health directly. And given how incredibly common insomnia is during menopause, focusing on good sleep hygiene becomes really important. Consistent bedtime, cool dark room, limiting screens, you know the drill.
Yeah, those all sound like really practical, doable things. And yeah, the sleep issues, that's definitely something I've noticed being a factor nearby. But this brings up another, sometimes difficult aspect, relationships. One of the most sort of heartfelt comments we got was from a 26-year-old daughter. She wrote that she sometimes felt her mom just hates her now because of these intense mood swings. And it actually motivated her to research menopause, not just to help her mom now, but thinking ahead for her own future kids, wanting to understand it better. How does menopause impact those family dynamics?
Oh, that comment really hits home, doesn't it? It speaks volumes about how deeply this transition can ripple through families. And those emotional changes she described, the mood swings, the irritability, feeling more anxious or on edges, they are very, very real. They directly stem from those hormonal shifts we talked about, impacting the amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center. It can make someone feel and therefore seem much more reactive than usual. And the most important thing for family members, partners, even older children to understand is that these changes are biological. They are not intentional. They're not a personal attack. It's not that mom suddenly hates her daughter. So the best approach, as the sources suggest, it really comes down to patience first and foremost, and education, understanding why this might be happening, and then offering support.
Yeah.
Sometimes that support might just be giving someone space when they seem overwhelmed. Other times it might be actively helping to reduce stressors around the house.
Yeah, understanding the biology behind it really does shift the perspective, doesn't it? It moves away from blame or confusion towards, okay, how can we support this process? This has been, wow, incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for breaking it all down.
You're welcome, and I really hope this is valuable for everyone listening. If I could leave a concluding thought, especially for women maybe over 40 listening to this, menopause is a transition. Yes, it can absolutely bring challenges, real ones, but it's also an opportunity to really take charge of your health, to advocate for yourself. We are thankfully finally starting to break down the taboos around talking about menopause. So please talk about it. Talk with your loved ones, your friends, and definitely with your healthcare provider. Don't hesitate. And for any partners listening in right now, your support, your understanding, your willingness to learn alongside her, it is absolutely invaluable. Stay curious, listen with empathy, keep showing up. It matters more than you know. I truly believe that together, by understanding this profound connection between menopause and the brain, we can genuinely change the way we approach women's brain health for the better.
That's a really powerful call to action. And maybe building on that link you described, between midlife brain changes, those energy level shifts, and how they might sow the seeds for later issues like Alzheimer's. Perhaps the provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over is this. If significant brain shifts are indeed happening in midlife, particularly during menopause, and if this phase really is a potential critical window for influencing long-term brain health, does that challenge our whole traditional view of aging as just this slow, inevitable decline? And maybe, instead, does it frame midlife not just as middle age, but as perhaps the most critical period for proactive brain care we have? Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.